Welcome, everybody. Welcome, fellow patriots. Welcome, fellow deplorables. Welcome, fellow dregs to society. Welcome, all you rock dwellers. Welcome, all you sycophants. Welcome, all you stinkos. And all you hateful people who celebrate the president and the prosperity of America. You're always welcome here to the Conservative Commandos radio show. I'm Rick Trader, coming to you from the studios of the Conservative Commandos Radio Network. And joining me as my co-host is the patriot from the state of North Carolina, the doctor for the Republic, Dr. Right, Dr. Nasir Shaikh. Nasir, welcome back to Conservative Commandos.
Thank you so much, Rick. Wonderful being here with you once again. And let's just start it off by saying what I always do to start off these shows. It's just another absolutely great day to be alive and well and free and living in the greatest country in the history of the world, the United States of America, bar none. Period. End of story.
And Nasir, I know you mean that from the bottom of your heart. You and I have been doing this show for 6 years now. I know where your heart is. I know what your mind is. I know it's important to yourself, your family, and our country. And you have some very exciting news to share with our listeners and viewers.
I do, Rick. I have decided that over the past 6 years, this has sort of been an evolving story of mine. This going, 1 foot at a time, step by step. And I finally decided that I wanted to put my hat into the political ring and decided that the House of Representatives, the Congressional District 4 seat, which has been held by David Price, who is the incumbent and a Democrat for, I think, the last 20, 30 years or so, is a seat that is worth fighting for. It's going to be an absolutely a tough battle. We have a primary to begin with on the Republican side, of course, with 3 other challengers and myself. Whoever comes out of that primary will face Mr. Price. It is a very liberal town. We're talking, Chapel Hill and Durham and those areas like that. But you know what? I want to bring the conservative values that I've been raised with, bred with all my life, that have been instilled by my parents, that have been instilled by some of my conservative mentors. Meeting you 6 years ago, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, Laura Ingraham, Tucker Carlson, Dinesh D'Souza. I could go on and on and on. Sean Hannity, all of these people. And so that's where I stand. And right now, like I said, we're raring to go. We're getting ready with, all the things that need to be started. And it's an absolute incredible experience. Just the adrenaline boost. Oh, the adrenaline boost is just there every day, waking up, thinking what you have to do, just trying to get the organization, all these things that you need to do to get a campaign started. And I'm just having fun. And I wanted to sort of, bring my conservative values to the conservative movement within the Republican Party. And like I said, as well as our viewers do, listening to me over the past 5 or 6 years, what a huge Trump supporter I have been always. In fact, like I said, if people go back to pre-election night on November 7th, 2016, I was one of the few conservative pundits that predicted and guaranteed a Trump victory all throughout. So
indeed you were, and I remember that distinctly. And I'm thinking, well, I know he's optimistic, and at that time, everybody and their brothers, except for maybe you and Dr. Gerard Lamaro, were calling for a Hillary landslide. And Nasir, I want to start off my part of the questioning of this interview by letting a huge elephant out of the closet,
so to speak. You're
a Muslim and you're running for Congress. Now, there are a lot of people out there today who are very leery of Muslims, to be frank and honest. They've seen and heard from the Omars and the Talibs. They've heard about Sharia law. They've lived through 9/11 and other terrorist attacks perpetuated by Muslims, and frankly, they don't like. They're very fearful. They're very mistrusting of Muslims. Why would they vote for you, a Muslim, a proud Muslim? And why would they want you to be one of the leaders of our country? Now, let me just say personally, as we've been talking, I know you. I've known you for 6 years. We have had these conversations at least once or twice a week during the Conservative Commandos radio show. We've been together at places like CPAC. You've been in my home. You've shared meals with my wife and I. Numerous telephone conversations. I know where you think. I know the way you think. I know where your heart is. And as I say, I know how much you love this country. I know where your priorities are. I know where your patriotism is. And I know through a conversation with you, it's not easy because not all your friends and neighbors are conservatives. But why should our audience feel the same way about you? Why should our audience support you as a candidate?
Rick, I really, everybody always says, they love the tough questions. Well, when you're going to politics, you have to answer those tough questions. And when somebody asks that questions, even when I'm on the campaign trail, I'll tell people, I'll say, you know what, you may be skeptical of this when I basically tell them that, yes, I'm an American first. And one thing I tell people all the time, and you know this, I don't believe in hyphenations. You're an American first, and then you put your ethnicity after that. So I say, I'm an American, and I'm a second-generation Muslim. And what I want people to understand is I asked a question. I said, how many of you have actually been able to, in your neighborhood, have you talked to someone who's a Muslim? Is there a neighbor, is there somebody in your neighborhood a Muslim? Have you ever been invited to go into a mosque or tour a mosque? And most of the time, you have very few hands that go up. But as soon as I ask the question, Rick, how many of you have heard about what it means to be somebody who's a Muslim or of the Islamic faith, and all you've heard about that has been through TV, radio, or on the mainstream media channels, and almost everybody's hand goes up. And you know who they're hearing about? They're hearing about those people, and I've written an article on this, and it's called Muslim versus Muslimist, Islam versus Islamist versus Islamism. And I said it's crucial to understand the definition of those words because everybody interchanges those. And what I want people to understand is that I am a Muslim, a pragmatic Muslim. And we have Muslimists in this country that are in our congressional halls. And I'll name them. We know who we're talking about. Ilhan Omar, she's a Muslimist. Rashida Tlaib is a Muslimist. Andre Carson of Indiana is a Muslimist. Keith Ellison, the Attorney General previous Vice Chair of the DNC, now the Attorney General for Minnesota, is a Muslimist. Linda Sarsour, the political activist, she's a Muslimist. What do I mean by that, Rick? Here's what I mean. Let's take an example. In my faith, in the Muslim faith, one of the things is that we're not supposed to drink alcohol. Beer, wine, liquor, not supposed to do it. Now, I know many Muslims that do drink, and I know many, many more that don't. You know what? I don't care. I don't go to them and say, hey, I don't think you should drink. I'm not going to be your friend. You're doing something wrong. You're committing a sin. Let live and let live. It's the golden rule. Do unto others as they would do unto you. That's why a pragmatic Muslim is how I want to live my faith. Now, we have people within our own community, Muslims, that will go to other people, Muslims that are doing something that they think they shouldn't be doing. And what do? They yell at them. They maybe scream at them, become belligerent. Maybe they even decide to sort of say that, they're going to do maybe they're not really going to do any violent act, but they sort of get to the point where you think something is going to happen. And those people are Muslims because they're telling you what they think you need to do. Now, let me take it one step further and how this happens within the Ilhan Omars and the Rashida Tlaibs and how the Muslimists talk about in terms of what they're doing. This would be, let's say, for example, you have a small town. And let's say that there's a liquor store in that town. And you've got a minority amount of Muslims that live in that neighborhood or that town. And they start to get up and put up a petition or start to protest and say, hey, because we're Muslims, we need to shut down that liquor store. That's being a Muslimist. Because what you're doing is you're taking your faith, what you believe, your doctrine, and you're trying to impose that on other people, and you're not even in a Muslim majority country. And I'll finally leave it with this, and that is when it goes from Muslimist to Islamist to Islamism, the difference between the IST and the ISM is that when you have Islamism, that's when they've taken and perverted the faith, and they've gone to violence and killing and all the evil atrocities that you hear that's been going on. And what I want people to understand is that this is that Dr. Nasir Shaikh, a pragmatic Muslim who loves his country, who loves America, who loves the flag, loves President Trump, has always been there, behind our president and on the Republican, the conservative side. That's who I am.
And you are listening to and watching the Conservative Commandos radio show. I'm Rick Trader, my co-host, and actually our guest for this segment is Dr. Nasir Shaikh. Nasir is a candidate for the Republican nomination to represent the 4th Congressional District in North Carolina. Don't go away. We'll be back with more right after this break. And welcome back. This is the Conservative Commandos radio show. I'm Rick Trader. My co-host is the Doctor for the Republic, Dr. Nasir Shaikh. For rebroadcast, check out our website, ccrshow.com. That is ccrshow.com. Well, Nasir, you've made the announcement here that you are seeking the Republican nomination to run for Congress in the 4th Congressional District in North Carolina. I opened this segment up by saying, let's get it on the table. Let's get the elephant out of the closet. Let's address it right now. That you are a Muslim. You look at yourself or you call yourself a second generation Muslim. But I wanted to know from you, when you hear from people like Omar and Tlaib and the others, the radical Muslims who have been elected as leaders in our country, but seem to want to tear down or rip at the fabric that has built this wonderful country of ours, who want to turn it into something else, that want to shred our allies, for instance, like Israel. Does that give you any particular feeling? I mean, what's that make you feel like? What do you think about that and those people that do those things?
Well, Rick, let's just put it right on the table. You know what it makes me feel like? It pisses me off. That's what it really does. Because what these people are doing, as I've told you before, is that they are perverting the faith that I grew up in. Literally, Rick, to be a Muslim, it's as simple as this. You believe in God. Number 2, we're supposed to pray 5 times a day. Do I do that all the time? Of course not. But you know what? That's between me and God. I try to, I fail. You're supposed to fast for 30 days during the month of Ramadan. And then you're supposed to give charity. And if you can, once in a lifetime, if you can afford it, go to Mecca and do the Hajj as a pilgrimage. That's literally it. And what Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, I mean, this lady, after she won the election, wrapped herself in the Palestinian flag. That wasn't a Palestinian election. That was a United States election. Why didn't she put the flag around her? And then Ilhan Omar she has the audacity to talk to us about being a Muslim. Really? This is a person who's having affairs in her life that possibly might have married her brother to get, citizenship in this country. Mm-hmm. This is a person who was rescued as a refugee when she was 7 years old, and this country allowed her to come here where she could thrive, where she could live, and she wouldn't be killed in Somalia. And we've done everything for her. She was allowed because she had the headscarf on. How many women put a headscarf on in Islam? Not really needed. If you want to, you can. She said, okay. And you know what we did in Congress? They said, you know what? You weren't allowed to before have any type of a headgear or a headscarf or a hat. Now, because Ilhan Omar has one on, let's go ahead and let her do it. I mean, all these people, Rick, every one of them, they just, as I said before, because they have taken the faith that my parents brought me up on. As I said, do unto others as they would do unto you. All we want to do is pragmatic Muslims. is just follow our faith and do what we want to do. We don't want to tell others to do anything different.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to be able to do what any other person of any other faith is allowed to be doing here in the United States. And as I said before, what these Muslimists are doing here, these Islamists, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Andre Carson, Keith Ellison, Linda Sarsour, and others, they are literally writing the wrong book on what it means to be a Muslim. And I believe that once people hear me, talk to me, see what I've done on Facebook, see the videos that I put out there, they'll know.
Listen to you on the show.
Listen
right?
to me on the show, obviously, because you're right. It's going to be tough for someone just to hear it. And
Right.
I believe so that I've looked on trying to do the research. I don't think there's been another American who's been Muslim, who's been 1,000% President Trump backer, who has ever run for Congress on the Republican side. We see a lot of American Muslims running on the Democratic side.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever seen one run for Congress or the Senate on the Republican side. So I believe I'll be the first. I could be wrong, but I if any of the listeners out there know of someone that their area that's done it, I would love to hear about it.
Nasir, you were talking about Omar being accepted into this country, probably having her life saved. I know you. I've known you for 6 years, and I've always thought of you and your family as the American success story. Coming here for freedom and opportunity and not for free things. Can you talk a little bit about your family and how you got here?
Yeah, my parents actually were quite young when they, came, and they actually left India at that time. They were born in India, and because of, the war, 1947, when the British, how many times has our friends are British now, but when we kicked their butt before, they had to kick their butt out of India, basically, and form a new country, Pakistan. And why did they have to leave? Because you know what? My parents, being Muslim in India, which is predominantly a Hindu country at that time, you had the same type of things going on: sectarian violence, ethnic strife. Religious liberty wasn't
just
available at that
movie
time.
Gandhi. I think it's
And just exactly, and there were things on both sides. But you know what? So they migrated to Pakistan. From there, my father got a chance. And at that time, post World War II, what was happening is the United States government, they were looking, it was called the brain drain. They were looking people within the STEM fields: science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So my father got a chance to come on over, legally immigrated here with my mom, 22 years old, my mom's 17. Remember, we're talking during the times of I Love Lucy was one of the shows on there, the $64,000 question, Ed McMahon. If you saw my dad at that time, pictures of him in a suit and a tie, he looked just like Desi Arnaz. And my mom was his Lucy. And you know what my father said? A 22-year-old and a 17-year-old coming across at that time. I've got a 16-year-old daughter right now. I can't imagine her being married and going halfway around the world to another country. But my dad said it was like he knew it was going to be a date that was going to last forever.
Hey,
and
Nasir,
they came here and started our family.
I hate to break, but we got to, try to stay along the clock. I want to pick up this conversation and have you tell the story about your parents coming here and yourself, and a little bit more about why you wanted to run for Congress. But you are listening to and watching the Conservative Commandos radio show. I'm Rick Trader. My co-host and guest this segment is Dr. Nasir Shaikh. We're coming to you from the studios of the Conservative Commandos radio network. Don't go away. Nasir and I will be right back right after this break. And once again, we want to thank you for staying with us. This is the Conservative Commandos radio show. I'm Rick Trader, and my co-host, Dr. Nasir Shaikh, is also running for Congress. He is seeking the Republican nomination to represent the 4th Congressional District in North Carolina. Nasir, I hated to stop your story, but we had to take the break. You were telling about how your family got here to America, and we pick up that story where you left off. Your mom and dad come here. Your dad was 22. Your mom was 17. I can't imagine being that young, uprooting your life, moving halfway across the world to start a new life.
Well, yeah. And so, like I said, so once he comes over here, Minnesota, and from Minnesota, there to Pennsylvania, Western PA, where from second grade up until high school, college into Connecticut, and then for the last 12 years here in North Carolina. One of the things was is as we were growing up, I was what they call WASP country, but I never felt out of place. I never felt out of place. We had some families that were from Greece. We had some families that were there from Poland in the area, but predominantly, it was a white, middle class neighborhood, and it was absolutely great. I had great friends. We had great times. I never once ever felt that I was out of place at all. Played baseball, basketball, football, the whole thing or whatever. And my dad and mom were Republicans. They grew up as, when they got here, there was a very good friend of theirs who eventually became my father's boss at his engineering company. And my dad just started gravitating, Muslims literally, if you take, and I tell this all the time when I'm talking with my friends here, is that we have so much really in common with the Republicans on the social issues. It is unbelievable. My parents love Ronald Reagan. My mom loved Ronald Reagan. I mean, I love Ronald Reagan. I mean, what's not to love? I considered myself a Reagan conservative, and people ask me all the time, and go, well, when did you become a conservative or how? Rick, I think I always was. I think I was inside, in the uterus, I was Republican. I mean, I don't even think about it. It's just natural for me. I can't think of being anything different.
I have this opinion, and shared by a lot of people. There's a difference between just being a Republican and being a conservative.
Yes, there is.
Where did your conservative values come from? What are some of your conservative beliefs?
Well, first of all, belief in God. And my dad, one of the things he taught us, the thing about this country is that anybody could do anything that they ever wanted. You could achieve any dream as long as you worked hard at it. Mm-hmm. And the things that they placed on in terms of family, in terms of just education, in terms of community, I mean, those are the kind of things, just around our home, for example, that was a place where, everybody wanted to be, they'd come in, oh, hey, how you doing, Mr. Shaikh? How you doing, Mrs. Shaikh? I mean, the neighborhood kids, they'd open up, come in. And the values that we have, a lot of times they talk about those Eastern values. Mm-hmm. You couldn't come into our house and leave without eating something. I mean, it was one of those things like, you talk about Italian families or Greek families or Arab families, they're just the hospitality that's there. So those kind of values that you talk about. And then the other things, freedom, the First Amendment. Although my father never really owned a gun, he did go a couple of times with friends and skeet shooting and other things like that. But you know what? It was one of those things where it was just in terms of, the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, these are the types of things that just sort of, you said, why not own a gun? And in Western Pennsylvania, I mean, come on, a freedom of expression, freedom to say what you want. Why not? Why should you stifle that? That's the whole idea. And as you say so eloquently, is that if it's not for the Second Amendment, there is no First Amendment. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the values, and we could go on to more as well. In terms.
If you were elected to Congress, what would you base your decisions on to introduce legislation and on voting on legislation?
Well, we've interviewed Dr. Paul Brown. He's a medical doctor, a wonderful, wonderful man. He represented the 10th Congressional District in Georgia, I believe. And I think he says he was called Dr. No because he would vote so many times no. And I think he had 4 principles. And I think if we follow those would be great. Mm-hmm. And the first thing he basically said, is it constitutional and is it the proper function of government? I think those are 2 important issues. Mm-hmm. Next, is it moral? Is it morally right? I think we've got to make that decision as well. And finally, is it something that we really need? And then fourth, can we really afford it? Mm-hmm. I think if you take a look at legislation that's going to be passed, and you also, and I would add one other thing, are we placing America first and the citizens of America first before we're putting the citizens of the world first, which it seems like our House of Lords and our House of Commons, as I jokingly like to call them, they try to do first? Why is it that they're always thinking about the other countries, other people, and not the hardworking people that have made this country the greatest country in the history of the world? And I'm talking about those people in flyover country, Rick. You know exactly who we're talking about. The backbone of this country.
You know, Nasir, again, another elephant might be looking at you, hearing your story about your family immigrating here to this country and thinking, oh, God, here's going to be a guy that's going to be soft on immigration. He's going to want a lot of gates in that border wall. What's your take?
You know, this is the thing that gets me into a lot of trouble with people in my community and my friends. And like I said, and we're like out here in Liberalville, you know, with Chapel Hill and Durham and whatever. And so when I tell them that, there's a look of shock and disbelief, and people go, "You're one of them?" And what do you mean by that? The border wall needs to be built. Mm-hmm. And if I had my say on how that border wall should have been built, I think that border wall should have been built about 30 feet high. It should have gone across 15 feet across, another 30 foot high, 30 foot. And then at every mile outpost of that 2,000 mile wall should have been, a century outpost manned by somebody from the United States Armed Services. We can use the veterans that are returning back from there. We can federalize the National Guard and put them on there. We have drone technology that could be, back and forth. And, I'm talking that we need to do that. Once we do that, Rick, mm-hmm. and we secure our border, mm-hmm. then we can decide and go, okay, for the 12 million, possibly 22, 30 million illegal aliens that are here. And yes, we're going to use that word, illegal aliens, because, mm-hmm. When they talk about illegal immigration, guess what? Immigration is legal. What they're doing is illegal. And then we have to decide, what are we going to do with the people that are here? Do they go to the back of line? Do they pay a fine? Do they get processed? How do they come out of the dark? Are we going to give them legal rights to vote? I mean, those are all issues we can talk about later. But right now, we need to close the border down. Another thing we need to do is chain migration needs to stop. Listen, you're a U.S. citizen. I believe that, if you've got a spouse, you can bring her over. Mm-hmm. You've got children that are abroad, you can bring them over, your mother and father, and that's it. And maybe we have to have some type of a date cutoff.
What about the anchor baby?
Anchor babies, 14th Amendment. I think that needs to be adjudicated at the Supreme Court. And I believe that anybody that comes across the border and decides to have a child, I personally feel that the 14th Amendment, I'm not a constitutional lawyer on this, but I think I can read pretty well. I would be on the side to say, I don't think so. I think that we've got to have a law inside there because there have been over, I believe, 700,000 anchor babies. I believe they were saying the past 35 to 40 years, and that needs to stop.
And this is the Conservative Commandos radio show. I'm Rick Trader. My co-host and guest is the Doctor for the Republic, Dr. Right, Dr. Nasir Shaikh. Nasir is also entering the political foray. He's running to seek the Republican nomination to represent the 4th Congressional District in North Carolina. I forgot to say this earlier. Tis on me for that. Today's show, like all our shows, is being brought to you by the First Amendment, protected by the Second. Thank you, Nasir, for reminding me about that, but don't go away. We will be right back. And this is the Conservative Commandos radio show. I'm Rick Trader, coming to you from the studios of the Conservative Commandos radio network. My co-host and my guest this segment, you see him, he's Dr. Right, the Doctor for the Republic, Dr. Nasir Shaikh, and I gave him that name, the Doctor for the Republic, because I know this man pretty well. I know where his mind is, I know where his heart is, I know where his patriotism is, I know where his loyalty is. and that's with the United States of America. Nasir, let's talk a little bit about some of the issues. Let's start with first, in introducing legislation into Congress, where would your priorities be?
The first priority that I would be, one thing is I would start legislation to defund Planned Parenthood Murder Incorporated.
Wow.
I think that's the first thing that I would do. Simple as that. Simple law. I mean, why can't it be defund Planned Parenthood? Now, of course, I call it Murder Incorporated. Can't write that into law, but let's defund it plain and simple. I know President Trump ran on that. So one of the things we're still waiting for, but I hopefully, he'll do that. Second thing, with all this stuff coming up about, the Ukraine and foreign aid, I would introduce a bill basically, and it would be something to the effect of this, that for every dollar, first of all, I would say that we need to freeze all foreign aid and cut it off at 50% immediately to any country going out there, and then put a freeze on it. Then take a case-by-case basis and reallocate those funds. And here's how I would tell Congress that what they would need to do. For every dollar of aid that's going to a foreign country, to foreigners outside of the United States of America, that they would have to allocate $5 in funding to be spent on American citizens, on American infrastructure, for American jobs, in American cities, in American towns, in American localities. So you want to ship $1 of our hard-earned tax dollars, abroad, you've got to allocate $5 to the United States of America. And finally, we need to do something for our veterans. I mean, you hear story after story of these veterans, these men and women that put their lives on the line, and then you hear some of them have to take payday loans. Some of them can't. They're getting food stamps, or they're can't have enough. The mom is left here, the wife is left here with children, doesn't have enough money, left over because some other emergency came on. Here's what I would do. I want to make sure I get this thing right. I would increase the armed services level pay across the board to $41,600 effective immediately for E1, 2, 3, and 4. What do I mean by that? If we can start talking about $15 an hour for civilian pay, hey, we can go to $20 an hour at the minimum, for these men and women that put their life on their line.
How do you pay for it?
Well, I'll tell you what. I think that as American citizens, if it were to me and someone saying that we're going to be spending $2 or $3 trillion that we've done over the past 15 to 20 years in Afghanistan, you know what? We could have given each and every one of our armed services members over $1 million with the money that we spent over there. And if somebody were to tell me that we're going to start doing, printing money, or we're going to start borrowing from somewhere else to pay for our armed service members, for crying out loud, Rick, we've been doing that all along for everybody across the world. So if we have to borrow something from China, Japan, I mean, I'm not for that, but I'm just saying my rationale for thinking is if that's what we're doing for other people, why can't we start doing that for our military people as well? And I think the American public, if they knew that their taxes were going to be raised a little bit to help that thing out, I think that they should do it. Another thing, any armed services member that's making $50,000, I don't believe he should pay any federal income tax, including their spouses while serving. And it goes up. Any service member that's deployed overseas should pay no federal income tax, including a spouse. I also believe that all service members should have free health care for them and their children. I don't think any veteran, any member of the armed services should be turned away at all. And all they have to do is show their ID, and in they go. And then finally,
do you think it's time to take health care away from the VA? We've heard these horror stories, and when I've talked to veterans, yes, they like the VA. Yes, they think the VA is important. Where there seems to be a problem with is the VA administering health care.
I think, Rick, one of the things is we're probably going to have to sort of phase that out because you can't, take it away immediately.
Why not give every member of the military a card that they can go to a doctor or hospital that they choose?
That's right. If they want to go to the VA, fine. If they can't get in the VA, they can take it to the emergency room. They can take it to a doctor and, set up some transparent costs that the government is going to reimburse these doctors and maybe make it a little bit above what the PPOs and the HMOs are doing, so doctors will be willing to go ahead and take these, our armed services members. Let's do something that. How about when doctors come out of medical school? How about sending them into areas, into the VA other hospitals that we can make that's going to take care of our veterans and do something in terms of that regard.
What about health care for the rest of us?
Well, I'll tell you what the Democrats and the liberals and the leftists are talking about, Medicare for all, we can't have that. I think what we need to do is, Rick, everything in our society right now, it's based on, there's no healthcare is one of the most highly regulated things that we have. 1/6 of our economy, and it's highly regulated. And here's what I would like to do. Why is it that you can't call up an X-ray office and say, you know what, I think I need to have an X-ray done today. The doctor told me that I need to come in, and call up 6 or 7 X-ray offices and ask them. If you do that, you know what they're going to tell you? What's your insurance? Who's it from? And I'll get, we don't know what it is right now, and we're going to have to call in. But if there was transparency in cost, that you knew exactly what was going to happen, and you had competition in the marketplace, you could drive down these health costs. If you had where you could purchase insurance over state lines, competition, you could do it. If you could pick and choose your plan, as a man, why do I need OBGYN visitation?
Well, there's a lot of calls out there, especially on the other side. Medicare for all, single payer system.
That's the VA.
Eliminate all insurance companies.
You can't do that. And you know what? There's a lot of people that have some great plans from the employers. What are you going to do? Put 30, 40 million people off of their private? You're going to decimate the private insurance industry? That's exactly what the left is sort of contemplating. Let me give you one example, Rick, of where this has worked great in the medical arena. You've heard of LASIK surgery?
Yes.
It's not regulated. Do you realize that when LASIK surgery started, there were few people that were practicing it? It used to cost you $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 per eye. You know what's happened now? The cost has come down.
Tell me, because I'm facing it very soon.
You're talking to some people. Dr. Dean Dornan, one of the top guys that started right here in North Carolina. I mean, I think it's like now $500, maybe $700 an eye. And so there's no insurance that pays for that. But because there's competition in the marketplace, and people can pick and choose who they want to go, and providers are increasing, and it's just in terms of the overall healthcare that's in terms of after the surgery is completed. I mean, that's what we need, is that if you have competition in the marketplace, you'll drive down costs and let people pick their own doctors, their own plans, and have a menu of options that are good for them and their families. And catastrophic care for the young people, because they don't need to get all those, they don't need to check every single box. They just need something catastrophic in case something happens. And it shouldn't be forced on anybody.
Nasir, in the 2 minutes that we have left, let's talk a little bit about our economy, the Donald Trump economy. Let's talk a little bit about taxes and your support of the President of the United States.
Well, first of all, another prediction that I had made, if people go back to that Facebook page on November 7th, and I was wrong. I was completely wrong. I said that by the time Donald Trump enters his into the, at the end of his presidency in 4 years, the Dow would hit 25,000. It hit 25,000, like about 8-9 months ago in this year, 2.5. And now it just broke, almost breaking 30,000. And we're not even we're just going to start his 4th year of his presidency. His tax cuts have been absolutely crucial. Remember how the left talked about the $2,000 was just crumbs? Well, I'll tell you what happened. During the Bush years, if you looked at how much the paychecks increased and what a family got back, it was about $400 in 8 years is what happened to the average worker out there. During the Obama years, it was almost $1,200. Do you realize how much it has been over with Donald Trump in terms of increase in the amount of money that a person's got back? Nearly $5,700 per family.
Yeah, it was Nancy Pelosi says that
just crumbs,
and somebody who's worth like $60 million. By the way, when she went into Congress, she had a net worth about $3 million. It's now $60 million. I wonder how that happened. Hey, Nasir, we've got to run, but again, I'm getting behind you, buddy. I support you. As I said, I know where you are as far as the issues and your love for this country. But tell our audience how they can help you.
Thank you so much, Rick. One thing I say is that when you're right, you're right. When you're left, you're wrong. I usually end our shows that way. But yes, thank you so much for allowing me to, sort of get this thing out there and start my campaign. People, you can get a hold of me at Facebook, which is The Nasir Shaikh Show, The Nasir Shaikh Show, NASIR SHAIKH Twitter at Nasir Shaikh Show, at Nasir Shaikh Show, and on my website, which is DRNASIRSHAIKH.com.
Hey,
Thank you
Nasser,
so
you know
much.
what? I appreciate somebody who doesn't duck the questions, and certainly you have it. And again, I wish you so much success. And you are listening to and watching the Conservative Commandos radio show with Dr. Ray, the doctor for the Republic, the Republican, or should be the Republican candidate for U.S. House of Representatives in North Carolina's 4th Congressional District, and that's Dr. Nasir Shaikh. On the other side, we're going to be talking with Daniel Mitchell. He's the co-founder for the Center for Freedom and Prosperity. He's written a very interesting article. The minimum wage should be abolished, not increased. We'll be right back with our next guest here on the Conservative Commandos radio and TV show.